Welcome to the G5 Hive, our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the American Athletic Conference to take a look at the Army Black Knights, who finished with the most wins in program history with a 12-2 record here in 2024. They were the AAC champs in their first year in the league, and they capped off their season in the Independence Bowl with a victory. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 11th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a man who can do it all. He is a writer, he is a podcaster, and is the editor at Black Knight Nation. He is Sal Interdonato. Sal can be found on X at BK Knight Nation on X. Welcome to the show, Sal.
Hey, it's good to be back, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, for those who are just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Army football?
Yeah, you have to go back. My regular coverage started in 2007 for a newspaper in the Hudson Valley. I was a backup writer. I think my first Army game was probably 2001, maybe somewhere around there. It was the Todd Berry era. A couple of years that Army fans would like to forget, but I covered a couple games against Tulane in the Todd Berry era. Ironically, now Army's playing them in the AAC and played them in the championship game last year. And after 2020, late 2020, left newspaper business, still had all this knowledge on my brain and in notebooks and on recorders or files or what have you. So I'm like, let's get Black Knight Nation started. At that time, people, podcasting was the thing, and, was able to get some former players on, some really kind of legends and royalty in the Army football programs on the podcast. And we've been going ever since. We cover not just Army football, we cover the other sports. The men's and women's lacrosse teams had pretty good springs this year. We try to get to all the sports of women's and men's basketball teams also. So we try to keep it going here at Black Knight Nation and give Army fans the best coverage that we could possibly get, that they can possibly get. So
you guys do a phenomenal job over there. Moving over to the Army football team, can you describe the offensive scheme for those that may not be familiar with Army?
Yeah, well, last year, 2024, Cody Worley, who was the quarterback's coach, first year as the offensive coordinator, and they went back to more of a flex bone offense. The year before, they tried shotgun with Drew Thatcher, and it didn't work. I mean, the team was 6-6, but man, if they had the flex bone 2 years ago, they definitely would have been a bowl team and probably would have had a couple more wins. They just struggled in parts moving the football, moving the chains. And so Cody Worley, who, he coached Bryson Daly throughout his first 3 years as his position coach, he comes in, and it's not like they're not 100% under center. They went to the shotgun. Sometimes they went a direct snap to Bryson Daly. They kind of a scheme to the defense that they're playing, so to speak. And I mean, they didn't throw the ball as much as they did when they had Drew Thatcher as the offensive coordinator. But now with Bryson gone, I mean, the guy rushed for, plenty over 1,000 yards, set the NCAA record for quarterbacks and rushing touchdowns with 32. Cody Worley's going to kind of design a scheme that fits his quarterback. So they have 3 quarterbacks right now that are in the running, and if it's Dwayne Coleman, maybe there's more under center. If it's Ethan Washington, maybe you'll see a little bit more shotgun. Maybe you'll see 10% more shotgun. Who knows? And Cale Helms can do a little bit of both. More of an under center guy, but Coach Worley did a really good job of just scheming to the opponent, maybe giving them some things that they weren't expecting. And it was a success. He's a bright mind, and I expect kind of the same thing. Yeah, you're going to have the slot backs line up a good portion of the time, but you never know. They went empty backfield sometimes, so you never know what you're going to get from Army. I think that's what they are going to have to do in 2025 just because of the losses on offense. So.
Well, Army's always had a strong running game, and in 2024, that was no difference as they ranked first in rushing yards with 300.5 yards per game. But let's start by looking at the position that keeps that rushing offense humming. That's the quarterback. Army graduated, as you mentioned earlier, AAC Offensive Player of the Year, National Collegiate Quarterback of the Year, and Army's MVP, Bryson Daly. Army's 2025 quarterback will have some big shoes to fill. You kind of name those names, and Coleman, Washington, Columbus. Who's in the driver's seat right now for the starting quarterback position?
Yeah, real quick, Bryson Daly also finished 6th in the Heisman. So I mean, it was an amazing year. As they break spring, Dwayne Coleman is at the top of the depth chart. He's a senior. Last year when Bryson was a little banged up, he got his first start against Air Force, and Army was able to beat Air Force at home. Coleman did a good job of kind of controlling the game, and Kanye Udo at the time had a really big game to help Army win. So Coleman has that game experience. That's something that Ethan Washington may not have, but Ethan Washington is a really talented kid. He's a 6'1", 6'2" kid, 195 pounds, good athlete, a guy who can, if he doesn't see dropping back, if he doesn't see anybody open, can take off and get some yardage. I don't know if none of those guys don't really present the inside running that Bryson Daly did, and the ability, Bryson Daly's ability to break tackles and actually inflict, physical contact on the defensive player instead of the defensive player knocking him down. That's not Dwayne Coleman. That's not Ethan Washington. That's not Cale Helms. So they're going to have to really spread the ball out. So you're going to need a smart quarterback. You're going to need a quarterback that doesn't make any mistakes, and that's going to be the guy who probably wins the job, to be honest with you. The guy who can run the offense the best when it comes to preseason, and the guy that makes the least amount of errors. When they line up against Tarleton State at the last Friday night in August, it's probably going to be Dwayne Coleman. Will Dwayne Coleman start all 12 regular season games? Can't answer that question right now. So,
well, you kind of talked a little bit about what Ethan Washington brings to the team, but what about Dwayne Coleman? If he's going to get the start, what should we expect from an Army quarterback here in 2025?
Yeah, I think his leadership. I mean, Dwayne Coleman is a guy who's worked his way up. When he got to West Point, he wasn't in the top 4 or 5 on the depth chart, but he found a way to stay on the program. He was a scout team quarterback. He's a hard worker, and he's a guy that's going to be a lead by example guy. He's not going to break you off the move your chain runs like the 15, 20, 25-yard runs maybe. But I tell you, in the spring game, even though they weren't having a lot of contact on quarterbacks, they were playing flag football with the quarterbacks. He got to the outside and had a 58-yard, quote, touchdown run. He was able to get to the outside. So maybe he can add that to his game. If Dwayne Coleman can add that running, and I'm not saying he's going to score 32 touchdowns in 2025. If he can spread the ball out, not make mistakes, use what he has in the backfield, throw the ball a little bit to keep defenses honest, which in the spring game, he did have a few nice passes that he threw. He hasn't been tested in too much against Air Force. He didn't really throw the ball much. So we don't know what that element is completely, but he just has to manage basically. And he seems like he's a really level-headed kid. He's a really likable kid. When you talk to, man, the team loves Dwayne Coleman. They're going to follow Dwayne Coleman into a huddle. They're going to listen to Dwayne Coleman in the huddle, and they're going to play hard for Dwayne Coleman. So a senior who's paid his dues, and we'll see if he can take over as Army starting quarterback.
Let's move on to the other part of the running game. That's the running back room. The Black Knights took a hit when Kanye Udo left for Arizona State. He accounted for 179 rushing attempts, 1,111 rushing yards, and 10 touchdowns. This room does return Noah Short and Hayden Reed, among others. How did the running back room look in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, the running back room, you have the experience with Hayden Reed and Noah Short, and then so other guys were given a chance to see what they could do. Jake Randina is the guy who's played plenty of football for Army, but his main job last year was a blocker. They put him in the backfield. he leads for Bryson Daly, and Bryson Daly has a little bit more of a hole that after the offensive line creates. So Jake Rendina is a guy that has experience. Hayden Reed is a guy who probably might be their most athletic player, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He was playing slot back for most of the season, all the season last year. He might have lined up a few plays in the backfield when they went to shotgun with a couple backs there. But when Kanye Udo says, I'm going into the portal after Navy, Army still has a bowl game to play. And Hayden Reed in a couple weeks lines back up at fullback, which he played before last season, and rushes for 100 yards and helps Army to a bowl win. So they think that Hayden Reed they don't think they're going to miss too much of a beat with Hayden Reed as the feature back. It's a matter of keeping Hayden Reed healthy. If Hayden Reed can stay healthy and on the field, he's going to be pretty effective. The guys behind him, Jake Rendina and Carson Smith, is a junior who seemed like Army was blowing out teams early in the season last year. So Carson Smith got on the field a little bit, got some game action in. He's kind of a power back for them, a power back. We'll see if he can, see if they rotate the fullbacks in. A guy to watch out for is Briggs Bartosh. He's going to be a sophomore, scout team player last year. He's not the biggest B-back or fullback at about 204 pounds, but he's got a lot of quickness. So I think he could be a change of pace back, maybe on a third down. Who knows? Give Reed, Randina, and Smith a breather. He's a guy who had a pretty good spring. His brother Braden is a senior offensive lineman on the team. And we'll see if those guys can get on the field together in the fall, and Briggs can have a couple moments. I think he's capable of it. I mean, I think he was a quarterback in high school. I think he played a lot of positions in high school in Missouri, but I think he was a quarterback a lot too. So he's got some good skills, and that's a guy they're hoping can help him out. Slot back, Noah Short's the guy. Samari Howard played a lot last year. Samari Howard had his moments, played kind of behind Miles Stewart. So he's an experienced guy. David Clerk is also a junior coming up who got some playing time in those third and fourth quarter, maybe blowouts, but showed some promise. He's got some speed. Those are kind of the guys that they're watching out for right now at slot back. I mean, it's a little bit by committee, but when you can bring a guy back like Hayden Reed, who has experience, he was playing his freshman year. He was getting game snaps his freshman year. Noah Short, who's really before I did some previews for magazines, Noah Short is their top returning rusher and their top returning receiver. You don't really have that a lot in college football. I mean, 569 rushing yards and like 318 receiving yards, which is okay. That's about on the par for Army. So he may be one of the few players in America that's his team's top returning rusher and receiver this year. So there's a note for you guys.
Well, it kind of sounds like, Hayden Reed's going to be the leader, but like you said, I think they're going to use more of use all the running backs to kind of replace that production from Kanye. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, and even last year, Kanye didn't play every down. He played a lot, but, Jake Rendina was in there on certain short yardage situations and blocking situations. And, like to say the Carson Smith, it played a little bit here and there. Kanye, I'm telling you, you're losing Kanye. You can't underestimate the loss of Kanye and Bryson. I mean, those guys just combined for a ton of yards. I think it was like 2,600 rushing yards last year, 42 touchdowns. I mean, that's a lot of production to replace. You don't do it overnight. You don't do it against Tarleton State in one game. He is probably the most gifted running back I've ever seen at Army. He's on par with Ray Maples, who played in the early 2010s. Ray Maples had a tryout camp with the Packers. He was a really talented running back for Army. Man, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's a tough loss. All the best to Kanye. He's just a good teammate, good player, and I think he's going to do some big things at Arizona State. So,
well, if you had to guess here in early May, who gets the first carry from the running back room against Tarleton State? Who would that be?
That's got to be Hayden Reed, I would think. if I don't think they really will not. They usually kind of like to give it to the B back or the fullback to see how the defensive line is setting up and how the offensive line is creating their holes and stuff like that in lanes. So I think it's going to be Hayden Reed. It could be a Coleman keeper, who knows? But I think they would go to Hayden Reed. Yeah, he showed in that bowl game that he can certainly handle that, and Hayden Reed is a very strong runner too. I mean, he's not Bryson Daly physical, but he could be a real physical runner, and he was catching real wheel routes last year as a slot back. So that tells you a little bit of his athleticism and what he could bring to the table. I think Army's going to throw. This is crazy, but I think Army's going to throw their fullbacks more this year. I think Army's going to send some fullbacks out in packages, and it's going to be things that defensive coordinators don't really have on their top 5 list to stop Army, and they're going to they might even dump the ball to Hayden Reed. Who knows? You want to get the ball in Hayden Reed's hands. You want to get the ball in the Noah Short's hands. It doesn't have to be all the time down the field. So we'll see. At least that's my take. So.
Well, let's take a look at this wide receiver room. Army graduates Casey Reynolds and Cam Schur. In terms of the wide receiving room, they accounted for 27 receptions on 47 targets and 540 yards and 4 touchdowns. Liam Forner is a leading receiver from 2024, returning here in 2025. He only had 1 catch for 28 yards. If it is even possible, given the fact that Army likes to run and the inexperience that's in this receiving room, do we feel like we see Army lean even more on the running game, or is it like you mentioned, kind of those dump-off passes, and obviously we'll get to Noah Short and his usage. Is it more for Noah?
No, I think Liam Fortner, he's a pretty good target, Liam Fortner. He's 6'2", he's about 204 pounds, and in the spring game, he showed that he got up made a nice catch. He had I think he had at least 3 catches in the spring game. So, he's capable. They just got to use him a little bit more. He's a great blocker. He's a great blocking wide receiver. I think he started most every game for Army last year because he just lined up and tried, here, Liam Fortner, go block an outside linebacker. Okay. He's a pretty, he's a pretty strong kid. And I think that maybe I'm not saying a breakout year for an Army receiver is what, double digit catches and maybe a touchdown here or there. He could certainly do that. Toby Olawale is a guy who was banged up last year. He played a bunch his freshman year. So going into his junior year, he's certainly capable. He had some pretty good catches his freshman year that were in the middle of some pretty, tough situations. So, he's certainly capable of doing it. Beside those 2 guys, Kevon Pointer is a guy who's kind of moving up the depth chart. Again, these guys got to block first before they catch, so whoever's going to be that disciplined and want to go out and hit a safety or a linebacker first and then go out and catch a pass later is going to get some playing time. You hope that they have some young guys coming up, some freshmen coming into the program that can be a little bit more of a Casey Reynolds, a downfield threat. That's what Casey Reynolds brought to the team last year. He averaged over 20 yards, easily over 20 yards a catch. Him and Bryson Daly had an amazing connection. So we'll see. That's where Noah Short might come into the picture because the Army's needs a downfield threat in the receiving game to keep the defense honest and for the the flex bone offense or whatever you want to call it to work. So
22.9 yards per catch.
Yeah.
Last season.
He's on the lacrosse team too, Casey Reynolds. So
we talked about Noah Short and how he was second on the team in receptions. He had 17. He was second on the team in receiving yards with 313, behind the 540 there by or he was second. Sorry, he was second there on the team. But tied for first in touchdowns with 3. Is it more of the same here for Noah Short in 2025?
Well, I think Noah Short is one of those guys who's just an inspirational leader too on the team. He's a guy that can get to the outside. He's a guy that can move the chains for them. He's a guy that they're going to try to do a lot. They'll probably line him up in all different. They might line him up out wide. They might line him up in the slot receiver. They're definitely going to run him as a slot back. Get him the ball. He's got game-changing ability, Noah Short. I mean, he's their big play guy that returns. So you got to give him the football. And I think that I got to know Noah a lot over these last few years, and he's a guy that will do anything for the team to win. Anything for the team. He really doesn't care what his stats are. He really doesn't care how many times he touches the ball. He wants to do everything he can to win. And when you have those guys that's why Army wins games. They don't really have guys that are sitting there hunting for stats, hunting for touches, hunting for catches and that kind of stuff. And for Noah to be a senior, right? The two captains on the team are on the defensive side, but if there's a guy who's the inspirational and vocal leader on this offense, it's Noah Short, and it's probably Dwayne Coleman. But Noah Short is a lead by. He's been on the field. He's done a lot in his 2 years on offense. He did a lot his freshman year with that block punt against Navy. So he has a lot of game experience. He's a guy who'll play special teams. He'll play punt block, for you. So I think that. Yeah, I mean, he's got to be one of their big play guys, no doubt, on offense. If they're going to be successful in 2025, he's going to have a big hand in it.
And I was kind of stumbling, fumbling, bumbling over my words earlier. Like I said, he was second. He had his 313 yards receiving, was second to Casey Reynolds, who had 457.
If you were to describe how tight ends are utilized in this offense to someone that's never seen an Army game, how would you describe it?
Yeah, blockers. There was a running joke where David Crossan had one catch last year, and he got into the open field and looked like it could have been a touchdown and just didn't make it to the end zone, And I think that even Bryson Daly said, we're going to get you the ball, David. We're going to get you the ball. Parker Poloski is a junior now. He was the second string tight end last year. We'll see if they try to get him. He seems like maybe a little bit more in the pass catching mode, but that doesn't mean even 10 catches in for the Army offense. That means maybe run a seam route and see what happens. If you can catch the defense off guard, maybe you can get some big plays. They have a lot of younger guys at tight end. Brian Dyer, who's a sophomore, who's behind him, guys who really haven't seen much action. So Poloski's going to be the guy. They like to, when talking to Coach Monken, I'm like, okay, let's break down your depth chart here. He's like, they don't have two wide receivers on the depth chart. They have one wide receiver and one tight end in their starting. So the tight ends are going to be on the field. They have some young guys. Tex Brennan is a guy who's going to be a sophomore that they're pretty high on. He's a true sophomore. Didn't go through the prep school. His dad graduated from West Point. He's a little bit taller of a target, so we'll see if they can get some of that in. Are we going to get a catch a game from the tight ends? Probably not. Are we going to get 2 catches for the season for the tight ends? Maybe that's my over-under, So.
Well, in 2024, this offensive line was awarded the Joe Moore Award for the most outstanding offensive line unit in the country. This offensive line takes a hit, though, here in 2025 as they graduate 4 of their linemen. But center Brady Small will anchor this line here for this upcoming season. And there were several other guys who saw some game reps, but how does this offensive line look heading into the season?
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line looks pretty good on the interior. When you have Brady Small back, he's a junior. This is going to be his 3rd year starting. He started every game his first 2 years. And he's just a tough kid. There's times where you see Brady Small get up slow from the pile, and he goes back into the huddle and he snaps the ball. I mean, he is one of their guys, right? And Paulo Generali last year at right guard, his first year as a starter, as a sophomore, was just amazing. He was just a really great, a road grader type blocker. He's one of the strongest. I believe he bench pressed 505 pounds a couple weeks ago. I believe he set a record for the Army in the Army weight room. He's a really strong kid. These guys are not your 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guys, but they're stocky and strong. And then they're going to add on the inside Will Jeffcoat at the left guard. Will Jeffcoat started a couple years back. He tore his ACL, missed the 2023 season. He was basically the 6th offensive lineman last year. He could spell Generali, and he could spell Bill Katsagiannis at guard last year. So he's got experience. It's not like you're bringing in somebody that's never played a game before. He started in the past. He's a strong, another strong kid on the inside. The tackles are the question marks, right? When you lose Connor Finucane started every game the last 4 years for Army. You know, I mean, you just don't replace that experience. Lucas Scott was a right guard in 2023. They moved him to right tackle. He started every game at right tackle in 2024. And Lucas Scott has an invite to the Giants rookie minicamp. Lucas Scott really played really well. He's a guy who they brought in as a fullback that turned into a starting offensive lineman by his senior year and was getting some NFL scouts to watch him. You know, so very talented, a heavyweight state champion, New York State championship wrestler. So how do you replace those guys? Those guys were maybe the best tackle tandem Army's had in a long time. So now they're going to bring in Henry Appleton, not bring him in. He was sophomore last year. Saw, you know, again, blowing out teams in the third and fourth quarter. Second string comes in. Henry Appleton gets, at least he has game experience that he's bringing in there. And it's kind of interesting what they did at right tackle. Teddy Williams, they moved from tight end to right tackle in the spring. And Teddy Williams is looking pretty good as their right tackle. He's the guy that they want to be their right tackle now. He was the guy, I'm told, that was playing the goal lines when they went to multiple tight ends. And he was the guy that was blocking to the absolute final whistle. He's a really tough kid. And when I interviewed him in the spring, he gave me a little bit of Brett Toth vibes. Brett Toth was a guy at Army that they brought in at tight end. They moved him to tackle, and he won a Super Bowl ring with the Eagles as their backup center this past NFL season. Now, I don't know if Teddy Williams has NFL talent, but I know he certainly was catching on pretty well. He's getting a lot of help from his teammates. He really cited Ned Brady, who's a rising senior, to help him learn the position. And when you got in one spring at the position, they're not moving them in the preseason to tackle. They've already moved them in the spring. He's banked those reps in the spring, and now he has a couple months to prepare for preseason and the season. I think that's going to be the key. If Appleton and Williams can be pretty good on the offensive line, they have great coaching. Mike Vitti, former Army fullback, is their offensive line coach. They moved Cheston Blackshear from tight ends coach to offensive line coach this season. He's coached at Florida. He's coached at the Florida Gators. You know, they have really good technique. They play with a lot of energy. They're the heartbeat of the offense. If the Army offensive line can be even a blip of what they were last year, the offense will be fine. That offensive line in 2024 was incredible. They deserved winning the Joe Moore Award. Those 5 guys started every game. They started all 14 games together. And the yardage that they put up, what Bryson Daly did, what Kanye Udo did last year, that's in the past, you know. But being in the room with the guys that graduated is going to help these younger guys, I think. Connor Finucane certainly was a student of the game, and he passed along some knowledge. So hopefully hopefully the offensive line is going to be one of the strengths again for them this year.
And talk about how great that line was. It only allowed 17 pressures and 1 sack all season.
Yeah, they don't throw the ball often, but still, that's a good stat. That's a good stat. Luke, that's a good stat. And I mean, I think they were just. I mean, you look at some of these games against the AAC. I mean, they just wore down their opponents, and to almost no mercy in the second half in some of these games early. You know, and that set the tone. And that is, you know, what this program's all about. They're going to win with toughness. You know, they're going to win with toughness. So your offensive line has to set the tone for that. I guess both of your lines have to do. Your offensive and defensive line has to set the tone for that, right? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, when you have guys like Brady Small and Paulo Generali coming back, yeah, you have to fill 3 holes. But those might be some of the best guys that have ever played their positions at Army, certainly in the Jeff Monken era. And maybe in the last 20 years or so, who knows? I mean, those are good guys to have coming back. So,
all right, Sal, if you have to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Wow, that's a good question. I mentioned Briggs Bartosh earlier, but I don't know if Briggs Bartosh is going to get the amount of snaps that I think. Maybe it's Jake Rendina. You know, maybe it's Jake Rendina. Maybe he gets the ball a little bit more, and maybe he gets the ball in goal line situations and short yardage situations where he could be like the Jacoby Buchanan of years past. He's like 255 pounds. The guy is a savant in the weight room. He's just he from Montana, high school Montana. He won like he was a weightlifting champion, maybe even on a national level. I mean, the guy, and just talking to the guy, he's very direct and he's very focused. And I think that, Hayden Reed's going to need a running mate. Hayden Reed's not going to be able to play every down at fullback. And if Jake Rendina can, provide that breather and be effective on the goal line situations, because there'll be a lot of times that Army's going to be like 4th and 1 from the inside, they're in the red zone. They're going to, Dwayne Coleman is not, it's not Bryson Daly. He's not the physical runner that Bryson Daly is. Who is a physical runner? Hayden Reed or Jake Rendina. So maybe depending on how it goes early in the season, maybe Jake Rendina can get those touches. And I mean, he's certainly capable. A guy, he may have a career touchdown, but he hasn't really had his moment yet as a West Point football player. So maybe it's this year.
Well, let's head over to the defensive side of the ball. And for those not familiar with Army's defense, can you describe the style and scheme that they run there?
Yeah, Nate Woody does a really good job of just playing to his players' strengths. They play kind of a 3-3-5, but the extra defensive back, they call it the Apache, kind of is a hybrid outside linebacker safety. And so, but when it comes to passing downs, they'll mix things up. They'll add a 6th defensive back. They'll go, 2 defensive linemen. He's pretty good at applying pressure to the right times to bring blitzes. He's done a really good job of just, like I said, getting the most out of the players. And it's hard to beat a Nate Woody defense sometimes. They usually don't hurt themselves most of the time with penalties, and they usually they're well coached and they play smart. So I think that was the key in 2024. It looked like the defense was going to be their strength coming back, where they had potentially 8 starters back from that defense. Transfer portal stuff has kind of jumbled that a little bit, but yeah, he's one of the better. If you have to rank top defensive coordinators in the nation, I think Nate Woody, because Army maybe not be in a Power 4 school, might not get all the credit he deserves, but to me, he's probably in the top 20, no doubt. So.
Let's talk about the guys up front along the defensive line. This group graduated 5 linemen and lost their leader in the sack department to Georgia. However, they returned the likes of Jack Latore, Cody Harris-Miller, Eric Ford, Jacob Tuioti, and Deshauntes Gray. How did the defensive line look in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, they're playing a lot of guys in the spring. They're trying to find the right combinations. I mean, Cody Harris-Miller did not participate in spring practice. He had an ankle injury late in the season and gutted it out against Navy. And, they wanted to get him as healthy as possible because he's a really key on the defense. I mean, he's a guy who made all the difference last year. He got to start as a sophomore. He was able to occupy the inside gaps to let the Army linebackers make plays. And he's the key to this. He's the key to this defense and defensive line. And a healthy Harris Miller, he's a pretty athletic guy for his size, and is able to get into the backfield a lot too. So if he can create havoc, that's key. Latour is an experienced guy. He goes into his 3rd season starting, 6'5", 275. You wouldn't expect an Army defensive end to have that kind of size and that kind of wingspan, but he's active. He's experienced and active, can make plays. Deshauntes Gray is a guy who got a little banged up last year, was in the rotation early, and then came back like later in the season. Now a senior is going to get his opportunity. This is his opportunity to play a lot of downs. What Army likes to do on their defensive line is keep their defensive line fresh. So Tuiotti's going to spell, Harris Miller. Javon Smith is a guy to watch out for. If you're going to ask me a defensive guy to watch out for Army that's kind of might sneak up on people, it's Javon Smith. He's a sophomore, good weight room guy, got good size, got good motor. He's going to be in that top 6 rotation too. So, I mean, they're going to guy that Coach Monken talked about a lot toward the end of the spring is Jack Bosom. He didn't play last year as a freshman because he was injured. He's another 6'4" guy, kind of like wiry, good wingspan guy. And he's the guy that'll probably get into the top 6. And then you're going to have guys that, like a Matt Gemma, who was playing nose tackle toward the end of the season when they were all banged up, who's playing nose tackle against Tulane, who's getting maybe a rep or two against Navy, who's playing in the bowl game. He's a sophomore. So they got a lot of guys that can get it done, and they're going to do it by committee. Cody Harris-Miller is going to be key. Jack Latour is going to be key. DeShantez Gray is going to be key, but they're going to get it done with depth and by committee like they have in the last. That's Nate. That's how Nate Woody likes to run things. So.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, they lose outside linebacker / edge rusher Elam Adozie to Georgia. That's a big loss for the group. But how do you feel they're going to go about replacing that pass rush production they got from him here in 2025?
Yeah, and Elam Adozie had 6.5 sacks, right? But if you watch their games, the quarterback pressures, the double teams that he was commanding, he must have been held about 30 times last season. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it seemed like every other pass rush, they're holding Elam Adozie. He's a next level player. He, like Andre Carter a few years back, had the big sack season. Andre Carter is now playing for is on the Las Vegas Raiders roster, I believe. Talent, but Elam Adozie's talent was right up there with Andre Carter. He's just a freak. They brought him in as a wide receiver at the prep school. He said he thought he'd be better on defense and maybe playing that rush. It worked out. It's a hard guy to replace. But Coach Munkin told me in the perfect world, if Ella stayed, that Eric Ford, who was Ella's backup last year and who played when Ella didn't in key situations, at that edge rusher, he was going to play the Apache if Elam Adozie stayed, because they want to get the best players on the field for defense. So now Eric Ford will just move over to that, start at that edge rusher position. And he had pressures last year. He was involved in plays last year. He's a senior. He's not a guy that's never seen another guy that's never seen the field again. He's going to be a guy that's going to be counted on to step up. And he may not have the stats to back it up yet, but they're gonna ask for Eric Ford for some production from Eric Ford, no doubt. So that's how they replace. It's not the worst thing in the world, because I think, to be honest, Eric Ford might have been a little out of position playing that hybrid position. So now he's going back to a position that he's familiar with, and he can get after it for his senior year.
Well, we talked about the captains being on the defensive side, and the linebacking group on paper looks to be solid heading into the 2025 season. They get their top 2 tacklers from a year ago in Andon Thomas and Caleb Fortner. And here are the 2 captains for this team in 2025. However, Brett Jarina and his 3 sacks from a year ago, he graduated and he'll be missed. How does the linebacking group look here in the spring?
Yeah, they, those 2 guys, Thomas and Fortner, are just the leaders. I mean, that I wrote this in I think a magazine preview with Fortner is the guy in the backfield in the line of scrimmage that's going to create. He's the physical guy. Not saying Andon Thomas is not physical at all. He plays hard. That guy, man, I tell you, I don't think I've seen a linebacker at Army play with the energy that Andon Thomas plays with. He can cover, he can rush, he can do just about everything. He's a little bit undersized, maybe he is 220, 225, but he's got a nose for the football. He's always around the football. I think he's got a 3.9 GPA. He's a really smart kid, a kid that reads offenses really, really well, right place, right time. And behind them, there's not that much experience. Brett Jarina was kind of the 3rd linebacker last year. He played in 3rd down situations. But if Thomas got banged up a little bit or Fortner, needed a breather, that was Jarina. The 2 guys that back up Fortner and Thomas this year were banged up in the spring. They're Noah Nixon and Baylor Newsome. They don't have a ton of game experience. Again, those 3rd and 4th quarters when Army was ahead in 2024 early, they got some playing time. I think Baylor Newsome had an interception last year and maybe a 4th quarter or 3rd quarter last year. So those are the guys behind them. Thomas and Fortner are going to play a lot. They have to in this defense. The plays are kind of moved to them in the middle. If the defensive line and Cody Harris Miller and up front are doing their jobs, they funnel plays to these guys to make big plays to the inside linebacker. So, I mean, they're the heartbeat. They're good. Army needs these guys to play even better than they did last year. Thomas had 98 tackles in his first season as a starter. I think Fortner had 81. Fortner is another guy who's made big plays. 2 years ago, he had that interception return in the Army-Navy game. That was basically a big difference in the game. They're playmakers. So, I mean, they're going to be counted for leadership, and they're going to make the defense no doubt go.
Moving over to the defensive backfield, they graduate Max DiDomenico and Chance Keith. Despite those losses, this room looks to be in pretty good shape as they return Casey Larkin and Justin Weaver. And it also looks like Jaden Mays is possibly returning. What should we expect from this defensive backfield here in 2025?
Yeah, they were a strength right when the season ended. And then you see wait, your two starting corners are going to the transfer portal, and Donovan Platt and Jaden Mays. And that was kind of a blow. But then you're like, all right, well, Justin Weaver was the third cornerback last year, and he's going to be a senior, and he had a couple interceptions last year. So it's not like you're totally, hurting in that position. You have to have somebody step up at the other corner maybe. But now with the news that Jaden Mays withdrew from the portal and is coming back, Mays and Weaver are pretty fine secondary for corners. That was pretty good experience. 4 interceptions for Mays last year. I believe Weaver had at least 2 interceptions last year. Okay. The defensive back, when you're looking at the safeties, Casey Larkin is going to have to be what Max DiDomenico was to the team last year. Max DiDomenico was a multiple-year starter, got the defensive backfield set up, right place, right time. And Casey Larkin was a playmaker last year for them. At the line of scrimmage and in the secondary, he made plays, tackles for losses, and picks. Expect a big year from Casey. And then who's going to play next to him? That's the question mark. But I think it'll shake itself out. Colin Matson, a senior, and Gavin Shields, a senior, are fighting to play in that other safety spot. Shields played a lot on third down. He was kind of their extra defensive back last year, and a guy that seemed to be around the football. He had seemed like he had 5 or 6 pass breakups last year as a sixth, defensive back. Now, whoever doesn't start there, my theory is, and this is no inside knowledge whatsoever, if Colin Matson starts at safety, Gavin Shields will be that Apache nickel back for them. That would be my way to go. He has the most experience. If not, it might be Cole Seawright, who's a sophomore who got some playing time sporadically, like in those fourth quarters, but doesn't have as much game experience as Gavin Shields. Gavin Shields is a special teams player, plays every special teams for Army too. So Matson had an interception last season. They have game experience. We'll see who steps up. Matson is a guy who has good instincts. I will say that too. He knows where to be. He's in the right spot at the right time. So that's what the secondary is going to come down to. I think, getting Mays back is certainly a boost. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Donovan Platt, if he's going to stay in the portal or come back. If Platt comes back, they're in really good shape.
Well, we asked you this last season, and your answer was Caleb Fortner. So I feel like this, doing pretty well so far and are 1 for 1. But if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2025, who would that be?
I want to say it kind of has to be Eric Ford. I want to say, just because of the loss to Mendoza and just because of what they kind of ask that kind of edge rusher to do. Because there's going to be times where they're going to put in passing situations where they're going to leave 2 defensive linemen on the field with their edge rusher. So they're going to have 3, and they're going to send blitzes up. But Eric Ford, I think it's his time. I mean, he's pretty highly thought of when he came out of high school out of Maryland. I think that he's pretty solid guy. He's a guy that doesn't really make too many mistakes. So I think if he can get to the quarterback, and in this AAC, right, we see that other teams do like to throw the ball around. Army's going to have its opportunities for those pressures and have those sacks. And I think that if Eric Ford can hold his own and maybe get close to what Mendoza did last year in the sack department, and maybe Elo had a crazy amount of pressures, if he can get half of those and just help out and draw double teams, and so the blitzers can get to the quarterback, I think it's going to be my prediction would be Eric Ford. I think that Eric Ford would be the guy, and maybe I'm just going to stick with Eric Ford.
All right, well, let's move over to the special teams. And how do those special teams units look in the spring, and are there any concerns?
Well, they don't really have a kicker who Dawson Jones is a sophomore, and watching Dawson Jones in practice and in the scrimmages, he has a pretty consistent leg and a pretty strong leg. He did kick an extra point last year, but last year they had a new kicker too, and Trey Granati, and we weren't sure what was going to happen there. And all Trey Granati did was hit 10 out of 12 field goals, and forced the fumble against Tulane in the AAC championship game, and he had to assume the kickoff duties really early in the season because Anderson Britton tore his ACL, and I think the second game. So he had to do a lot last year, Trey Granati, and I think Dawson Jones is going to be, right now, it's Dawson Jones' job to lose as a sophomore. He's out of North Carolina. I believe he was trained by Dan Orner, who was a former Michigan State and North Carolina kicker who has trained a lot of pretty good, successful kickers. So I think that Dawson Jones, Army doesn't 12 attempts last year. It's not like Army's going to kick 20 to 30 field goals, right? But when you do it, you got to make them. And Army's not going to try the long 50-yarders most of the time. Anywhere between the 25-yard to 40-yard field goals, you got to be able to make them. And I think that's where Dawson Jones can be effective. James Wagenseller was Army's punter last year. They didn't punt often last year. I think in maybe 21 to 24 times last year. He averaged 41 yards a punt. A little bit more consistency from James, maybe. I mean, he's got the leg, certainly got the leg to be a more get the yards up, and Army has pretty good coverage on special teams. So he did a good job with that, getting the kicks high enough for the coverage to get under. As any player, you just want to grow and get better. He's a junior this year. There's a lot more potential in James Wagenseller for Army this year.
Well, now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into the 2025 season?
Yeah, I guess it's going to be two, and one might not be what Army fans want to hear, but one's the offensive line, because you just don't know about the tackle situation. You hope, for everything I hear, Henry Appleton's been really good, and Teddy Williams is growing into the position, but you just don't know until the games start, and you lost some really good players there. Like we said, there are some guys that have played snaps before that are upperclassmen: Tanner Bivens, Lane Parks, to name a few, Braden Bartosh. Those guys are mostly interior guys, so they're really young in experience at the tackles. Last year they had Jordan Booby Law, who was like a fifth-year guy who could have their third tackle. Didn't play too much, but he had a lot of game experience. Don't have a lot of game experience on the offensive line as far as the tackles. That would be maybe a concern. We'll see how it goes early in the season. And quarterback, when you lose Bryson Daly and you just don't have, granted, Dwayne Coleman did take a fair amount of snaps last year, not just in the start, because the third and fourth quarters early, he was called upon when the game was a little bit sideways, and he has game experience. So, but to play a full game, 12 games in a season, we just don't know. I think he's certainly capable of doing it. And the depth behind Dwayne is, guys haven't played in games. They just don't have the game experience. And might there be a freshman that sneaks onto the depth chart coming in? There might be. There's a player named Bryson Luther that played at the prep school that I think they're pretty high on. Does Bryson Luther get into mix? A guy that I didn't talk about either is Zach Mundell. Zach Mundell did not play last year. He hurt his knee in spring, and he was a guy prior to that was playing slot for Army in their kind of that shotgun offense, play slot receiver, but he was recruited as a quarterback. And can he get into the mix as a number 4 and move up if he can get more reps and feel more comfortable playing at quarterback? He's a guy, they like his burst at quarterback. He might be the answer to breaking off some big plays at quarterback, but how comfortable and healthy will he become preseason? You think he'll be ready to compete? Can he move up the depth chart? He'll have to jump up a couple people, but we'll see. It's just an unknown at quarterback right now, to speak. They're not going in saying this guy's my starter. Yeah, Dwayne Coleman was number 1 at the depth chart in spring. But there's competition. It's not. We know Bryson Daly's coming back, and that they have to. It's gonna be a battle in the preseason to see who's the number 1 quarterback. So,
well, what do you think the main strength of this 2025 team will be?
Still defense, right? The defense might have to until the offense. Now, I may be wrong here. The offense might rush for 500 yards in the first game against Tarleton State. I don't know, but I think the defense is going to have to carry this team. And they did for a little bit last year too. They have, now I think they will have 6 starters back, guys with some decent playing experience. That's going to be the strength of the team. The middle of the field is the strength on defense is Army. Cody Harris-Miller at nose tackle, the 2 inside linebackers, Caleb Fortner and Andon Thomas, and Casey Larkin at safety. You're bringing back 4 out of the 5 kind of guys up the middle. You lose Max DiDomenico, who was very important, one of their best defensive players last year. But when you can bring 4 out of the 5 guys back in the interior of your defense, that right up the gut, it's pretty. That to me would be a strength, I would think.
So 2024 was a historic year for the Black Knights, but what does success look like for the Black Knights in 2025?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wrote somewhere I think they can still compete for being the upper echelon in the AAC. I think they could be like a top 4 team in the AAC. I do believe that still. The schedule is a little different this year. You have to go to Tulane. You have to go to East Carolina. They didn't play Tulane in the regular season last year. So there are some the league schedule is a little tougher this year. So I don't think there'll be so many cakewalks like there were earlier in the season. But I just think that this season is going to be determined about how Army wins games, their execution and their toughness. If ball security is great and they can get the takeaways on defense with a pretty experienced defense, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to win 12 games. I don't see that, but I see that they can compete for an AAC title. And you know what? Even more importantly, they have a bad taste in their mouth losing the Navy. That game was that was the worst game that I've seen Army play in a while. And you could say they won 12 games last year, and that was a disaster against Navy, to be honest with you. They had played the AAC championship game the week before. It was a pretty physical game, even though they did have their way with Tulane. They left it a lot on the field to win that AAC championship, and the price that they paid was, Navy had a little bit of a break before they played, and Navy came out ready to play, and they hit Army in the mouth a couple times, and it just wasn't Army's day. So, I mean, yeah, would they love to repeat as AAC champions? Of course, but they want that Commander-in-Chief's trophy back, and that's going to be a tall order because Navy's going to be pretty good with Blake Horvath at quarterback. Blake Horvath, we saw in the Army-Navy game, he had a great season before that. No doubt the real deal. He's the real deal. So, I mean, winning the CIC and taking it back from Navy is not going to be easy. Going out to Air Force, not always easy, even though sometimes Army's really handed it to Air Force out there. So, we'll see. But, I mean, I think the Commander-in-Chief's trophy is number 1. I think they can win. They should be a bowl team. I mean, it should be a bowl team. They should go minimum. They're going to win at least 4 conference games, in my opinion. They should win more. Should they be 6-2 in conference? Probably at worst. So there's your bowl. You're qualified for your bowl. They'll go to a bowl game. Hopefully it's not as much as a disaster as it was last year with an opponent and just like playing a team that didn't even belong in the bowls in Louisiana Tech, with all due respect. The AAC, in my opinion, I don't want to go off on a tangent. They just didn't really. That was not handled well by all parties, and to have a 11-2 team play a under 500 team was a joke. But I digress. So I think like 8-4 regular season sounds pretty good. Could they be better? Yes. Could they be 7-5? Maybe. But I think that they got a good. I hate the word culture is used a lot, but they just got good leadership on the team, and the coaching staff. They brought in a couple new faces, but the guys that they brought in are pretty good. So I mean, I think that they're gonna have a winning season. It's just a matter of, can they keep that going in the AAC. They're 8-0 in the AAC. They've never lost the AAC game yet. So we'll see what happens. The Navy game doesn't count. So so we'll see if they can get it tonight in their third game, because they got to go out to play Kansas State, the second game of the season, and they don't get a break there. You play Tarleton State on a Friday, and the next Saturday you got to play Kansas State, who probably will be ranked, right? They probably will be ranked and probably be pretty good. So we'll find out a lot about Army in that second game against Kansas State, no doubt.
Well, can you tell us about some of the rigors that a service academy athlete experiences that perhaps most other athletes do not on a routine basis?
Yeah, I think the class schedule is a little bit more of a grind. The material in class is a little bit of a grind. You're not taking any I don't want to say a basket weaving or anything like that. Your class schedule is pretty good. To wake up the morning, the formations are early in the morning. I think most of the cadets are probably up by like 6:30 a.m. Say you're a player and you're banged up and you need to get treatment. Well, you got to find a way to get some treatment before formations, and maybe get up to the facilities maybe early. The training now. The military training they're going to do as soon as class ends, which is going to be pretty soon, I guess, in May. They'll maybe take a week off, and they'll do their military training on the earlier side. Since Munkins got here in 2014, that's the way they've done it. And then they'll go to summer classes after that. So they'll go to summer classes and weight lift before they go to preseason. In the past, they would come right from military training and go right to preseason practice before Monken got there. And so you would get guys that are coming in, like especially freshmen, that have been through, beast barracks, cadet freshman boot camp, basically, and they've lost a lot of weight. Now, those kids still have to come in, but I think it's just a better situation for Army. Munkins handled it well. The rigors are the academics and the military commitments, the formations, the meetings and stuff like that. For cadets, but I mean, Munkins done a good job of handling that. Has a pretty good track record, so it's not for everybody. Playing service academy football is not for everybody. The other service academies do it to an extent too. I mean, you're up till 11:30 at night doing classwork sometimes, and then you're gonna wake up. You're gonna get like 5 hours of sleep, maybe at best, and then you're gonna get up and do it all over again. There's no going to no going out and socializing at all too much, especially during the football season. So it's different. It takes a special type of athlete and person to play football at the service academies, especially Army. And Munkins done it, and his staff has done a good job of finding those guys. So,
we've kind of talked about it a little bit here and there about the prep academies. Can you tell us about the unique prep academy setup that the service academies have?
Well, Army's a little bit different than why don't I know? I know Navy's Army's prep school is basically on campus. It's on the other side of campus. It's by Washington Gate. They have a school and a turf football field, and so when they're not playing, say they play a game on a Friday night, the prep school team, and there's a Saturday home game, they could be in attendance for the Saturday home game. I think they might have to be in the stands. I'm not sure if they're on the sidelines, but they can go to practices if they want. They can't, obviously, they're not lining up, they're not taking any steps, but they can watch practices and see what's going on. what happens is Bryson Daly, right? He graduates very soon from West Point. He's going to be a GA for the prep school team. So those quarterbacks are going to have Bryson Daly coach them in the fall. That's a pretty good coach to have to be prepared for West Point. Bryson Daly was an excellent football player, right? Maybe the best football player this Army had since maybe the Heisman Trophy winners. Who knows? But he is talking to his teammates and just getting to know Bryson. He's an even better person. And so his dad's a lifelong football coach in Texas. You're going to be coached by, man, you're going to be those quarterbacks in that offense is going to be Bryson Daly. They send some of the graduating seniors up to be GAs. They call them up at the prep school. So that's a benefit for Army, no doubt, and a benefit to, they run the same schemes. They play Navy and Air Force prep every year, and I think Air Force prep school is pretty close to their academy too. But Navy's is in Newport, Rhode Island, so that's not too close to Annapolis. So I mean, that's a benefit Army has. They moved it about 15 years ago there, and and here's the thing with the prep school: they're going to bring in probably 50 kids, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, and they're going to weed out the kids that because they go through at the prep school, they go through kind of a boot camp too there. It's not to the extent of the West Point boot camp, but they get a little taste of what military life is. And sometimes it's for the kids and sometimes it's not. And they get a little taste about what academics is going to be like, because West Point is one of the best academic schools in the country. It's not easy going to West Point. The class load gets pretty interesting, and it's very difficult. Not a lot, it takes a rare, it takes a really smart kid to get through West Point. And so, it's a lot, but having the prep school there is an advantage. It's been an advantage for Army. And I think that's one of the keys to why they're successful. You look up and down the rosters, more than half of the rosters went through the prep school. Bryson Daly went through the prep school. Kanye Udo went through the prep school. There's a lot of guys. Brady Small went through the prep school. Caleb Fortner went through the prep school. Andon Thomas did not go through the prep school. So,
well, Sal, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think we should know about this 2025 Army Black Knights football team?
It's kind of like I don't know if I expected last year to the extent, right? I mean, last year 12-2. I mean, once they got off to the start that they did, you could see that there was something special about that team. So we're going to have to see if that kind of magic and aura kind of it stays with this team. Like I said, there's a lot of people back on defense. There's a share of guys who were a big part of the offense last year back. And I think that, it's going to be interesting. Health is going to be really important for this team. Really important. They're not going to be as deep as last year as far as the experienced guys behind people that have played a little bit. So they're going to have to keep people healthy. If they can keep people healthy, we're going to see a pretty exciting year, I think. I think that if Ethan Washington gets a chance to quarterback, well, it'll be really interesting to watch. We'll see if maybe they go with the two-headed quarterback. Maybe. Will they go with Coleman during running downs and Washington during passing downs? Will they Munkins alternate it sometimes? Starter gets the first snaps, bring in the number 2 for the second series, So who knows what they're going to do. I think right now they want to have one guy, but that's something to watch. I think the schedule too is something to watch. They only have 5 home games this year. So, last year they had some home cooking last year, no doubt. I mean, they didn't lose that Mikey last year. And I think that's something to watch the schedule. Mikey Stadium, they're renovating Mikey Stadium. The East stands are coming together. They're not going to be ready for this season. The 2026 season is the hope, and it's looking to be on schedule. So those of you watching might see some construction in the background this year. They had it last year too, but you'll see more of the actual structures up now. So it's getting there. The iconic Mikey Stadium is getting back to where it used to be. So that's about it.
Well, Sal, thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun, guys. I always enjoy talking Army football, and anytime you like to have me back, that would be great.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.